Okay, so let's proceed from where we left. So we were in the activity dashboard, and we had already created the layouts, particular edit text, and even the buttons that we wanted to use. So we can now go to the Java side, of course, in the dashboard, and then now from there we start finding our objects by the IDs, and then now we begin the process. So something that I want you to notice is that there's this object, a private activity dashboard binding called binding. So you can see how it has been used. Binding equals activity dashboard binding dot inflate get layout inflator, meaning the entire layout, now everything is being known by this binding. So we have set content view, of course, binding dot get root, and then now of course there's that particular action bar, and then now we have this navigation controller, and then now there's the floating action button. So this floating action button, something that you might have noticed is that the floating action button, when you click it, for now it loads the snack bar, akapop-up kasmall kapop-up hapo chini. So that is what we call a snack bar. It is just created by saying snackbar.make. Yeah, na si lazima utumie snack bar. You can decide even to use a toast. That is, if you want to communicate to the users, you can just say toast, and then from there you pick this one, new toast, and then now from there you define your message that you want here, hello or whatever message. So you can always use a snack bar or use a toast. For now, I am not interested in messages. I am interested in actually saving my data when that button is clicked. But where is the data coming from? So you need to start first by making a way of defining the data. Now that we are using binding, we don't actually need to find the view by ID, because already binding knows everything. Just the way it knows the floating action button, binding also knows the particular IDs that we had created down there. So we can decide anytime this button is clicked, then we start capturing data right away inside the on click event here. So here we can just say string which string edit, or I can say string names, no, string IDs equals binding dot, because binding already knows what we want, so we can say binding dot the edit text for ID dot get text to string, get text dot to string. So we have already captured our ID. So that means we can even capture the rest in a similar design. So we wanted ID, we wanted name, we wanted course, we wanted phone number. So we can say now string course equals binding dot ed. No, let's start with name so that we can be consistent. So string names equals ed names dot get text dot string, then the string course equals ed course dot get text dot string, then id, no, not id, phones equals ed dot binding dot edt what, edt phone. There we go. This was edt course dot get text dot to string. Very good. So now we have our content with us. So before we start activity of saving, it's also good to do validation to know whether really there was some data, so that in case there was no data, then we don't try to save empty stuff. We save content that we are sure that the content is there. So that means now in our save button, you can start by checking whether it is empty. So you can say if into brackets IDs dot is empty, then that means we have to tell the user to fill everything. If we want just to do it in one if then you can just say or if names dot is empty, then or if cause is empty, dot is empty, or if what phones is empty, then we can just return a snack bar or a toast telling the user kindly fill all the fields. So you can just come here and say fill all fields. But again, it will be advisable if you could handle each input at a time, so that at least now, instead of just having one general message, you can say particular specific message like ADT ID binding. You can say binding.edt phone, for example, dot set error. That means you are very specific, you are targeting a particular object. You set the error there, and then you say type number. That means you want to be specific on what exactly error you have gotten. But for now, let's just be generic. Now after that, you can say an else and then curly bracket for the else. Curly bracket for the else. So now that we have gotten our content, now that there is phone number, now that there is name, now that there is cause, now that there is ID, then it is the high time we start now saving our work. So the first thing we need to do before now doing the saving is to create a database. So how do we do it? Of course, we want it to be at a global location because we will still use the same during viewing and editing. So somewhere here, right outside your button, make sure you are outside this button, somewhere like here or whatever location, maybe, yeah, somewhere like here, or even here. You can decide now to initialize your database. So what is the name of my database? So I have not even created it, so let me just say what is the name of my database. I can call my database maybe students, or I can call it maybe school or whatever, or maybe DB. So I can just say SQLITE database called DB. That is the name of my variable that as I will use it to initialize my database. So I'll come here then, and then I say db equals open or create database. Open or create database. Open or create database. I can see they have several options here. Let me see the one that works for me. There is one with file cursor factory, then another one is string path of the SQLITE database. I think I can pick this one, open or create database, and then I need to define the name of my database. So what database am I creating? Of course, I want to create a database called SchoolDB. So that means now inside this particular bracket, I can define some quotes, and then now double quotes, and then now define the name of my database. So I'll call it school database. And now the second parameter is supposed to be what now? The cursor factory, string path cursor factory. So for this one, I can just say mode private. It's bringing some error. Let me see. Do you have a third parameter? Null. Okay, I can do away with the mode private. Let me do away with the mode private. Yeah, that's okay. The other alternative I can do, I can just retain that and remove these parts. Yeah, that works for me. So db equals open or create database, then the name of the database, mode private, and then now factory null. Okay, don't worry about that. We'll be able to tackle it later. So db is our variable that we'll be always using anytime we want any connection to do with the database SQLITE. That is a variable that actually points to where the database is exactly in the phone's memory. So now it is time for creating the table where we are going to insert our data. So how do we do it? Then we can just come here and then decide to create the table here, or create the table still again at this particular time of initialization of our database. So once you do the creating of the database, you can also create the table. But remember, we can't insert data unless we have done the validation and until the button has been clicked. So that we can avoid creating table every now and every then we can have the table created maybe once there. All right, so how do we create that database? We said db is the one that knows everything. So the moment you say db, then you should be able to get something like execute SQL. Though now inside here we expect to put one parameter, which is now the parameter for creating our table. So what is the parameter? Create table if not exist, blah blah blah. The normal SQL that we've been tackling all along. So you can type some quotes here, and then now we type our query. So the query says create table, create the normal query actually, create table if not exists, so that we don't keep on creating and creating and creating. Then now what is the name of the table? Students. We can call this table students. And if you remember, the moment you say create table if not exist, what follows is usually brackets where we define the columns inside there. So now let's start defining our columns. So the first column, we can say it is a column for inserting IDs. So I can just have some quotes. Then from there, of course, now I have terminated my string up to this particular point. So I want to introduce my variable through a plus sign, and then from there the content. So the content here is which column exactly are we talking about? So I can put quotes so that I can now type my content here. So the content here will be my content here will be ID. So this ID is followed by the data type integer. This data type is followed by, in case I want this to be primary key, it is the key constraint, primary key. And in case I want it to be increment itself, then I can say auto increment. I think that is how it is usually created, auto increment. Yes, so that is okay. So I can have my comma, and then now from there another double quote, and then a plus sign. Then we proceed to the second object. So the second object here will be name. Let me just press enter so that at least you can be well and consistent. I think there's something that's not coming up well here. Let me just repeat this process. Because if we are not keen, we're gonna bump to an error. So the code here was create table if not exists, and then the name of the table, students, and then brackets. Now inside these brackets, what we are supposed to define here is the column names, all separated by commas. So the first column we can say the first column, comma, the second column, comma, the third column, comma, the fourth column. So now the first column here is ID column. This column ID is an integer, and then we said it will be our primary key, so no repetition, and then we said it should auto increment. Okay, so we can go to the second column again and define a similar stuff. So the second column is name, then from there this is supposed to be text. Then from there, of course, we are not expecting this to accommodate empty content. Now from there we can go to cause. Then now from there cause, which is text, and then now we expect this not to accommodate empty content. Our last thing will be now phone, and of course we'll just allow text for those who type +254, because the plus sign is not a number. So you can say again phone followed by text followed by not null. So we have created our columns now for our particular table. Now, so let's go to the insert. Let's now go to the real activity, because that's where we are expecting now to insert our data. So once you are there, we expect now to create a db.execute SQL kama kawaida. Then from there we write our SQL for inserting data. If you remember, inakuanga aje? Insert into, then of course students, make sure the spelling is exactly there. From there followed by brackets where you define the columns, then after that followed by the values, then followed by brackets, something like that. So here we define the columns. So what are the columns? The column hapo sasa ID tuliacha nje sababu ni auto increment. So tunaanza na name, name, comma, course, comma, nini ingine, phone. ID yenyewe itajiingiza. So we come now to the values. Where are these values supposed to come from? Of course we have the values here, ID, names, course, and phone. So we can just say here IDs, names, course, phones. Yeah, that is one way you can do. The other way you can do, you can just to avoid SQL injection, you can have this as question mark 1 2 3 onita to by this here in. So 1 2 3 name, course, and phone. Then from there you get outside, and then from there you define new object, new new. After the brackets we need to define now our new objects. Oh yeah, outside here, new, yes, new, new arguments, very good, new object. Then now we define the arguments inside curly brackets. So useme the values itakuwa inatoka wapi? Itakuwa inakuja kutoka kwa names, hii yenye iko hapa. So make sure the spelling is exactly, kama ulitumia names utumie names hapa, kama ni name then utumie name. Then after that, you go to fonts. After that, you go to fonts at that particular point. So now here I have insert into students name, course, and font. The values are 3. Then now the exact values will come from names, course, and fonts that we defined on top there. So if we have succeeded in inserting, then we can just toast some message in the screen telling the user data has been inserted successfully. You can come here and say toast alafu useme data has been inserted successfully. Records has been records have been kizungu have been inserted successfully, something like that. Simple and clear. All right, although that is not the best way of doing it, you also need to verify virtually whether really data got inserted before saying data has been inserted. But for now, you can do that, and then so that our content does not still continue sticking in the views, we need to clear. So how do we declare? We can either create a function for doing the clearing activity, or we just do it here right away. How do we do? We just come here and say binding dot we start with the phone number, we'll start with name, then we say dot set text to empty. When you do that, sasa inamaanisha umeng'oa hiyo text yenye ilikuwa pale. So you can do that for the rest. You can do that for the email, you can do that for the course, for the phone, and also for the course. So you can come here and say binding.course set text, binding.phone set text. Now, if we automatically inserted the ID, then that means we didn't even capture the ID that the user typed. And that means our very first edit text here is obsolete. Yeah, you can just do away with it because it is not of much importance for now. So I think we are done with this particular step for the dashboard inserting. So the next class now will be viewing what we have inserted. See you in the next class.